The Legion Tactical Squad. The Tip. That's us today. An honour, to be sure. One we have long attempted to gain. Long. It was that night. That one event over 4 years ago. It haunted us. Followed us like a shadow. Because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. Oh no, not Ulick. Our dear sergeant. Our albatross. None of us believed in luck or curses. That stupidity was for the distant past, where humanity lived in caves and worshipped the sun as it greeted them each morning. He wasn't bad luck. He was hated. Hated, I tell you. Not just by us. Well, we did also love him. He was ours, our brother, our sergeant, but we had to live with him. And those that did not? Well, he was an acquired taste, to put it mildly. Sorry. Defending him again, old habits, even in my own reverie. I make excuses for him. But no, he wasn't an acquired taste. He was unlikable in the extreme. Bullish and blunt like most Marines. We do not stand on performance, just utility. But even so, he was bellicose and truculent. He would not hold his tongue. Ever. As he always put it, they can listen or they can fail. It's up to them. But either way, my duty is discharged. I'll do as instructed, but they'll get my opinion before I go. And he meant it, every word. I think, if he were less effective, it wouldn't have been so bad. Perhaps, if he just didn't show them all up so much, he would already have been a praetor or consul. But no. He was blunt. To a point far beyond rudeness, even for an Astartes. And each time he was proven right, which was often, he would not hold back. Never let sleeping groks lie. Most didn't like that. Most. He said he had an expectation of competence. An assumption it should be present in any he served with. Anyone. And his standards were the highest in the expedition. We, his squad, truly were the best. We had to be. He'd destroy anyone, anything less than exceptional, if I am honest. We followed him despite his personality, because that old cuss got us through every single time. Which didn't help either. He had the least casualties in combat, most outside of it, as he weeded out new recruits. But he got us through. He didn't care. Not about us. Just the effective running of the squad and its honour. Our banners should have been heaving with awards, commendations, rewards for excellence. But he made it impossible. The spectacles were nothing to him. The reward only counted. And even here, he was churlish. Stated loudly things like, "Finally! About time!" Or even, "So, force you to it then!" at the decorating officers. Yet, we were the best. In a collection of the best warriors humanity had ever produced. So, he stayed as he was, never promoted, too useful to discard. And he was our leader. But also our burden. None would transfer. The legions were not like that. But none of us would ever be noticed. When Cadmus took the eye of a greater Xenos tyrant in a single combat, it was not noticed. when I shot the eye of the pilot of a fleeing Psyker's barge, bringing it and him down into a fiery death. It was not commented on. When Regulus charged a bunker and single-handed cleared it while we held perimeter against a swarm, noted only. We were his, alone, for no other squad wished they be tarred with association with us. It was lonely, but we had each other, so we trained together endlessly, with the best oiled unit in our expedition. Some veteran squads had less experience and reaction time than us. Most had less service time combined. 4 years ago, he did it. He finally went too far and made it all this bad or worse. The Primarch, his guard. Why could he not have just done as everyone else did? Why could he not obey? Show some decorum. Show some damn respect. We were aghast when it happened. They were never more than 49 paces from him. From our lord, our master, the Pale King, Mortarion. We rounded a corner, and there one was. One of his bodyguards. He stood outside of a door, ignoring us. And then the sergeant said it. "Slumming it down here near the actual fighting today," over his shoulder. He smirked at his quip as he went. But it was noted. That was the day it got worse. Became as it was. Guard duty, garrison, sweeping forests, baggage duty, more guard detail. In one sentence, he had robbed us of any chance of rising with him. His career was over, and so was ours. Or so we thought. We were often linked near destroyer units, supporting or punching through so they could do their nasty deeds, unpleasant in the extreme. We were as unpopular as they. But today we are washed clean. Today, we are signalled as forgiven. For today, we have the spear tip. Now our many detractors do not know it yet. They scoff behind closed doors, eyes twinkling as they see us in the mess. Smirks and nudges. Because they think this is a death sentence. I hope far more forlorn than even breaches, because this one is going to be nasty. But they underestimate us. They overestimate the enemy. And when this is done, when we face them all at battle's end, they won't be able to stop us. They won't be able to ignore or belittle or deplore us. They'll be forced to give credit. They'll be forced to give us the bump. They'll be forced to cover us in glory. So today we are going to fight like mad dogs, like monsters, like dusk raiders. We march out of our camps and swiftly erected bastions in our thousands. We do not take transports. The storm is coming. So we march. Our army arrives at the outskirts of their last city as it hits. They were mustering, preparing to attack us. They had tasted our air support too often and too bitterly to ignore this advantage when the odds would, in their minds, be more even. We have the tip. We are the first in. At the front of thousands of our kind, scores of Astartes in blocks of units stride beside and behind us. The storm comes in over their city and into our faces. Our visuals are practically useless, or so the enemy believe. We switch our sensors and see their seemingly endless mustering heat before us. They believe we are blind. For what could see through this sandstorm, but they, the children of the storm? We see them advance. They are clever Xenos. Huge. They do not charge. So many are they that we would hear that, even over the storm. No, They advance in a strange slide. With their feet, they do not raise them, but allow the storm to almost propel them along the ground, mildly bouncing up at times to be forced forward if needed. But a wall of them hundreds deep advance, but scattered. This will be their last battle. We advance slowly but steadily at the front. We have one job, and we will do it. And the rest of the units on either side or behind us maintain their slow trudge. We move. The sergeant just snorts down the comms at the units behind us, the destroyers. Then he snaps his last order, the only one he has to give us. Sigma pattern advance! And we know. It's our time now. We are in 2 lines of 10 as we advance, not walking, but running, our strides eating the ground between us and the hordes. We fire a blistering fusillade into them. Rank after rank of the large pallid Goliaths fall. At 12 foot apiece they are, but their limbs blow off and their heads explode under bolter fire. We unload as fast as we can, chewing through our clips at an unprecedented pace. As we move forward, we judge by clip changes. By the 3rd, we have closed in. We are now 3 ranks as the grenades are launched from our squad. More of the enemy die as we close the last yards. Our chain bayonets are ripped into a deafening roar only seconds before we hit them, while the rest of the army marches out of the storm and into them, slaughtering them with volley after volley. We are leagues ahead and amongst them. Strangely, their powerful bows are more effective at piercing our warplate than their bronzed weapons. Despite their size, they are not even as strong as we are in our power armor. Their blades shatter or bend on our warplate. We can still be killed by direct blows by their malleted royal guard. Warhammers so heavy they can barely wield them. They do not hit often, but if they hit dead on, dead is the word. But we are better. Our sergeant has drilled us so we can perform these actions blindfold. We dance around the huge lumps and bowl them over and tear them to pieces. Why do I mention the Royal Guard? Because, before we know it, we can see them. And they are charging us. People think a battle is one thing. It is. And it is not. For us, it was a succession of incredibly brief duels. For these Xenos had cultural mores against physical contact. Hence, even in war, their densest formations were a good pace apart. They were large, but they were slow, and they were spread out. So we butchered them. If they just locked arms and charged as one, they would have literally trampled us. But their gods forbade it. So we killed them. Perhaps they had come from a period of ease. There seemed to be zero dangerous flora or fauna on this planet. None. Perhaps once upon a time, these were a mighty warrior race that had exterminated everything of threat on the whole world. They had made a paradise, but they had become soft. Or perhaps they had always been harmless, gentle giants that simply never had to strive to fight for their very existence. We were not avenging angels. We were not soldiers righting a wrong. They'd done nothing to us. We were the march of inevitability, and they were in our way. Desperation leads to extremes, and across the battlefield the Xenos now charge. Their slow spread advance killed so many of them that they made no progress against our bolters, always pushed back. But now they erupt into a final wail. A single scream is torn from their lungs as one, the death scream of a race, and they charge across the whole lines. Knowing so many will die, they forget all and do the unwanted. They begin to bunch, and the main thrust falters. Bolters are drowned out by the chain blades now running in their thousands behind us. But they are behind us. We are the spear tip, but one that has outpaced the leaf and the shaft. We see their line troopers break before us, as Sarge tears the head off 2 enemies, and then goes on to tear the guts out of another. He is in his element up close. We all are. He barks a grunt, and we finish ours off viscerally to intimidate. Then we form up and begin to fire, but we do so carefully. The Royal Guard. They have shields that stop bolters half of the time, so we head and knee shot them. It's going to get nasty if they hit us. But it's then that he, our sergeant, snaps another grunt. We break into 2 groups, like the parting of a sea, fluidly and efficiently, always maintaining precision fire, even in the storm. And they are here. The destroyers are about to introduce themselves to the Royal Guard. Story continued in Destroyer Squads. Welcome, gentle listener, I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and features of the 30K universe and Horus Heresy, where the age of knowledge and enlightenment has ended, and the age of darkness has begun. Now I make no secret of my love of one unit in Warhammer above all others. I've done entire videos about them, barely containing my mirth, my joy, my inane childlike giggling at their wonder. But now, I have a new favourite unit. And I've not even played it yet, but I know the rules. They change, you see, so it's not my main concern. It's the feel of them, what they are, what they represent, what they mean, that entices me. And I can declare that the humble tactical unit is still the name of this favourite unit, but its origin? The Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy. Yes, even I have now jumped on that bandwagon, now that they have been released in plastic. So this is my unvarnished honest opinion. I didn't get anything from GW, so it's legit, as they say. Now, back to the unit. You'd think they were the same. Both called tactical units, both containing Marines. Power-armoured with bolters mag-locked to their sides. Earlier versions, mind you. But then, modernity does not mean superiority in the Warhammer universe. Quite the opposite, usually. So bear that in mind. They have the same grenades, both at the bedrock of their respective armies, the Chapter and the Legion. But honestly, this is where the similarity ends. But why are they so different? Let's recap very briefly indeed with the Adeptus Astartes tactical unit of the grim darkness of the far future of the 41st and 42nd millennium. The tactical unit is a Swiss Army knife of all troop units. They are magnificent. They are comprised of 10 Space Marines, a sergeant who leads them, who can be armed with a wide selection of rare kit. The Heavy and Special Weapons Marines, armed with all variety of diabolical weapons of war. From the ubiquitous heavy bolter and missile launcher, all the way to the wonderful melter, melty. The last 7 Marines have the steady bolter. All carry frag and crack grenades. Most have access to melter bombs. The tactical unit of the Chapter is a holding unit, a breaching unit, a range fire support unit. It is the universal key that fills almost all battlefield locks. It can be deployed in the midst of the thickest frays, or hold hard locations against a swarm of enemies. It is versatile, powerful, and nuanced. It is the very king of the battlefields of the 41st millennium. The Legion tactical unit is none of these things. Although the tactical squad is the core of the Legion, they are not the same thing at all. The tactical unit of the Great Crusade and subsequent Horus Heresy comprises up to 20 Legiones Astartes. 20. The sergeant leading them can requisition artificer armor The same combi weapons, a Volkite Penta, or power weapons for close quarters. Sounding similar still? Let's push on. The squad can contain a Legion Vexilla, which is merely a back banner. Many of the chapters have back banners, but these are more antiquated or pompous outfits. It is something we will get to in a second. Perspective is all. One Marine would usually carry an augury scanner, which is an advanced energy reader. Think a tricorder, but far less subtle, if you will. And the squad would usually have a Nuncio Vox, being a more powerful receiver of messages. Most often, the helmets of the Marines will be enough, but it never hurts to have a long-range send and receive system. And this is in every squad usually. The difference seems so subtle until I make my last pronouncement. All of the Marines of the Legion, all 19 of them, with the sergeant, they are armed with bolters. That's it. No special plasma or flamer weapons, no heavy bolter or melter. Just bolters. Strange, no? But the last few pieces of kit make the sun come from behind the shade and throws total illumination over the real situation here. For each of the Marines will usually be armed with a bayonet or a chain bayonet. Now the chain bayonet is a thing of horror, for it is affixed to the front of the bolter. It is a simple triangle of metal with a chainsaw edge perpetually whirring when active. Now the bolter is a sturdy weapon and is used as a bludgeon by the Marines of 40k. But this edition, it makes each and every Marine in the squad into a close quarters nightmare. Now smaller units of 10 Marine tactical squads were often deployed, usually in rhinos, but the main tactical squad is a larger 20-man block. And what a block it is. It is what it is used for, what it means, that makes me so excited as a fan of the setting, for this shows the core of the Age of Darkness, the grand scale of it all. For the 40k tactical unit is not the same in its use. The chapter of Marines is not the same as the Legion, not just in scale, but in outlook and approach, but also in weapons, equipment, technology, and leadership, if I can be blunt. They are warriors who are perpetually on the defensive war, despite being shock troops. The chapters of the 40th millennium are tasked to hold ground, often by retaking it, this is true, but they hold areas. Unless they are on a crusade, they will have a set perimeter, a set turf to protect. Always too large for their comfortable control, the Marines are an army besieged. They never know what they will face when they take out into the void. Will it be a demon incursion, the walking legions of the dead, the nimble and dizzying Eldar, the swarms of the hive mind? Will it be an insurrection of civilians and planetary defense forces, pitiful but plentiful? A fallen Astartes military regiment, chaos cults, or fallen Astartes? The chapters simply are never sure. Not really. And this means that they must be armed to deal with any threat. Their tactical units are king of the battlefield, can arrive by drop pod or rhino or foot, but they are, inevitably, a defensive army. They now judge their honor as great, detailing their glories in their annals, praising and honoring the fallen and the brave. But there is always an element of satisfaction, if not outright pride, at the people they save, the worlds they defend or reclaim for the Emperor. They can judge their success in many ways, not just heads or kills taken. The productivity or populace of their fiefdoms, their growth or lack of shrinkage at the least. They are the defenders of humanity. The Legion is simply not the same. The Legion has all the resources it requires. They are not denuded by a war, not tired out by it. Even in the midst of the Horus Heresy, when half of the galaxy was in flames, still they had more equipment. They certainly had more access to technology. They had more tanks, transport, ships, titans, knights, and marines. Well, certainly during the crusade, before the Astartes slaughtered each other in what some say was a well-planned self-destruction, but for another day. The tactical unit of the Legion represents a lack of requiring to be some form of all-round unit, despite their inherent adaptability and value. The Legions had the right tool for the right job at the right time, in the right amount. Even when outnumbered, the Marines of the Legions were far more effective and experienced in grand-scale wars. The kind that would make the modern Marine as slack-jawed in shock as the Solar Auxiliary were on Istvan. For people forget that there are plenty of threats in the grim darkness, of course, but the Imperium is built on the worlds of 1,000 races, the sepulchres of 1,000 species. The Crusade was so effective, so fast, so powerful, so well organized, that they wiped out most of the races in the galaxy. Of course, one can look to the Eldar and Orcs and say, well, not quite, eh? But this is in fact disingenuous. The Eldar have ever been shadows in the void, moving from space to space without truly getting involved. Oh, they defend the odd maiden world, send out the odd pirate fleet or incursion. But since Slaanesh and their fall, they have been little more than an annoyance. The Orcs are another vexation. World after world can fall to them as they send a war rampaging into the Imperium. But when the war is inevitably stopped by the Militarum or Marines, they fold. The worlds they took are quickly reclaimed in most instances, and easily. For the Orcs are a one-directional charging bull, but the instant its charge has broken, the armies fall apart. Most often they slaughter as many of each other as any army of reclamation does, for leaderless Orcs are as dangerous to each other as anyone else. So like a cold or virus, they can temporarily cripple segments of the Imperium, but in reality, the effect soon blows over. A century or a millennia later, at the very worst, no record of their invasion even exists. No memory, no impact. The Necrons had been asleep, and the Tau and Tyranids are newly arrived on the galactic stage. So where the heck are the other myriad of alien species, empires and enemies that should fill a galaxy of billions of stars? Them? They're dead. The Legions wiped them out. From the Nephilim to the Rangdan and everything in between, the Great Crusade was far more effective than any truly take the time to ponder, to realize the level of genocide that occurred, the blood-soaked accomplishments of the Emperor and his sons, the near total domination of the Milky Way galaxy. No mean feat. So when one compares the armies, one has to really, truly and deeply understand and compromise this difference. The chapter of Space Marines is all too aware that they may be losing the long war. They can judge their achievements in many ways, as we have discussed. But this is not so with the Astartes of the Legions. The success of the Legions was such that they had nothing to compare, nothing to compete over, but victory. No race could threaten the Imperium after the Rangdan Xenocides. None. The Crusade expeditionary fleets and their legions could turn around and be ordered to return to Imperial space, but this was usually for a grand muster for a new campaign, rarely being the exceptions to the norm. They might have to go back to quell a rebellion, but this was usually dealt with by the 8th or 18th, if I am remembering things correctly. They simply did not lose. Ever. Oh, battles or engagements could be lost, of course, but any form of resistance was short-lived then. Even Alanor, the ultimate Orc empire built on what many believe was their world of birth. The collection of legions taken there by the Emperor did not think if they could win. They thought of how and when they would win. They made it happen, yes, but even if all of the legions there mustered were wiped out to a man, they still had plenty more. The question was when and how much force to use or how long it would take. The question was never if. Victory was already assured. So the tactical marine unit is for massed engagements that like the chapters would balk at. In the 41st millennium, they would call the Guard to make up the mobs. The vast numbers required for this level of engagement. But during the Crusade and Heresy, the solely auxiliary regiments were for holding actions, for garrisons, for, yes, making up the numbers in truly titanic struggles. But make no bones about it, the main fighting unit of the period was the Marine. It was the legions that fought through the galaxy. It was the legions who mustered in their tens of thousands. The Tactical Marine Squad of that period is not designed to be able to take on all comers, because they did not need to. The lumbering tanks or hulking bio-titans of Xenos races were annihilated by Titan legions, Knight households, or the massed ranks of the Astartes armor. Heavier, much better equipped, defended, and more lethal armor compared to what is available to the chapter. The Marines would be massed and then charge. Not suicidally, not stupidly, not usually. But the scale of war was different. So these huge squads of Marines would be required because the legions were confronting and destroying ancient empires and Xenos races entire. They were cleaning out the whole galaxy. And the battlefields that existed could be littered with the entire warrior caste of a species, millions or billions of them. And one can ask that. What would happen if we were invaded on Earth? Many of our military and civilian forces would mobilize. And when we worked out the total genocide of our race was the goal of the invader, I like to think that every last one of us would step up and take up arms. What choice would we have? Hence the battles of the Crusade were very rarely the last ones of the race involved, for nothing stopped the Crusade. And so, blocks of genetically enhanced warriors with power armor and vicious weaponry would ride or march into a battle, knowing that they needed to wipe out every last one of the enemy, not just break them, annihilate them. The tactical unit had bolters because they were designed to match massed enemy infantry, and I mean massed. They would advance, throwing out bolter fire. They would break into a charge and then barrel into the enemy. Chain blades whirring even on their bolters. The block of Marines would push into the front ranks, shooting, ripping, tearing, and leaping over the corpses to get to those behind. Routs were the result of many a charge. Few could ever stand up against a Marine, let alone a score of them. And they were 20-man units, as many chapters worth of warriors would take to the field at the same time. Never would there be far between the front ranks of tactical units and the ever-present specialist squads. Again, it would be a thing for the modern chapter to envy, being a tactical squad in the legions. For instead of taking a position and having one heavy and one special weapon, the Legion Tactical Squad knows that the tanks or behemoths of the enemy will be dealt with by the vast amount of heavy weapons units only yards away. Not 5, but 10-man units of missile launchers, plasma guns, Volkites, or even melty. The supporting armor and heavy dreadnoughts, let alone the Titans and Knights in far greater numbers than would ever be seen in 10,000 years later, or the Legio Cybernetica, entire phalanxes of war robots marching into the enemy and taking their fire. So this is the difference, the crux. The Crusade armies of the Legiones Astartes were a true army, not just the elite. Despite how they were, man for man, better equipped and led, certainly better supported, they were the force that took the galaxy. And one unit of 20 Marines? That was a huge loss against insignificant foes. But when push came to shove, first in the Rangdan Xenocides, then in the destruction of the Orcs at Alanor, then ultimately, during the battles of the Horus Heresy, the scale was so huge, so fierce, that a unit of 10 Marines was practically nothing. A unit of 20, in the battles of this scope, they were as important as a unit of Astra Militarum in the battle of the 41st millennium. Oh, I may be taking some artistic or dramatic license, but not as much as you may really think. Yes, the Marines were awe-inspiring at their time, individually, as a squad, but most impressively, as an army. And when those golden armies of heroes turned on one another, it was so bitter, so damned bitter, that the legions would attempt to exterminate each other. and they went all in. Always. So these units were still the mainstay, as Marine fought Marine, brother fought brother. Sidebar concerning Terminators. The dream of the tactical dreadnought armour, or the Terminator, as it is more commonly known, being dispensed to every Marine, was both possible and impractical at the same time. It was the dream many had before the heresy. For the Astartes was seen as a shock troop. They hit and destroyed. They did not fight protracted wars, and more often than not, they were in the very heart of the foe. Decapitation strikes, the spear point landing. It was so effective that Terminators seemed ideal. Then the Horus Heresy occurred. A Marine fought Marine. And it was soon discerned that the larger, bulky armour was not immune, not even to bolt fire. For people forget the unbelievable accuracy of the Astartes. Always. Perhaps it is the lack of reflection in the game, but each Space Marine is equal to a world-class sniper or marksman. World-class. Unless they fight themselves, they do not miss, and they can call shots as required. So the heavy Terminators were seen as a boon, but only in the right circumstances. In an open area, where the lighter marks of power armor could outmaneuver them, the Marines could shoot out their weak areas and cripple them, while easily avoiding being reached by them or being in arc of their heavier firearms. Hence, they were not welcomed for all situations, but also, as the heresy went on, as the galaxy burned, the ability to create suits of tactical dreadnought armor declined, as humanity bombed itself back into the Stone Age across system after system. Sidebar over. Hence the tactical squad, the backbone of the chapter, was also the backbone of the Legion. Not only when conquering the galaxy, but also, lamentably, when slaying their own. The Legion and chapter tactical squads show everything you need to know about the two settings, for they are simply not the same. The parody of it is that the galaxy of Warhammer 40k is expansive and feels so. It has more enemies coming out of the many regions of the void. It feels large. But its battles are, if anything, far smaller. While the scope of the Horus Heresy is actually narrow, practically a line between Estevan and Terra, and the spotlight on so few primary movers. Yet their conflicts fought were of an almost unimaginable scale compared. This is how I perceive the matter with the information I have at present. If you have another view, please do share it. I try to read as many comments as possible, and always more than I react to, always ready to learn from the collective, often more than any learn from me, I can assure you. That's the beauty and horror of Warhammer, 40 or 30k. There is always, always more to learn. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief foray into the Age of Darkness, one that will be followed up by Destroyer Squads next Friday, I hope. I feel it's time we at least dabble a bit more in the Horus Heresy, seeing as I am reading up on it a lot more now. Just the basics, of course, as usual. Now we have another channel, link in the description, along with all of the usual stuff, and we will be dropping our second video on Sunday. So wish us luck, and tip up if you fancy some relaxing natural history. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.